Going back to the social reinforcement thing, I've heard in different debates that you've had with the kind of a skepticism towards it, and I had a skepticism towards it until something happened recently, which is in this last election, watching how many African American and Hispanic men switched over to the Republican Party, and it's funny because
it was now allowed.
Well, remember I called it the Myron Gaines effect, and then Kamala Harris in her memoirs literally wrote it was Andrew Tate and Myron Gaines by name were the people that were causing so many minorities to now feel, remember, social reinforcement. Now it was socially reinforced that I don't need to vote for the party of Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion, Glorilla, and Jennifer Lopez. I don't have to vote for that party anymore. Maybe I want a wife. Maybe I want a woman who isn't going to cheat on me, and it doesn't matter what color my skin is. So when I see social reinforcement change something that has been so dogmatic for 70, 80 years, black people, you vote liberal, period. You don't have any, you are absolutely no question about it. It doesn't even matter if you don't like your party, you vote that. When I see that social reinforcement, and then you talk about a sisterhood of women that used to put the social reinforcement to say, hey, maybe Stella got her groove back, eat, pray, love. Maybe you shouldn't be bragging about the fact, Brittany Renner, that you slept with 3 guys in one day, and then becoming famous for that. Maybe the social reinforcement from women might be the way to create the society that you're trying to represent here.
The thing is, it's funny, is that pre-feminism, we had that.
Yes.
So the idea was women, because they were not political pawns, were looked at as more moral authorities on things, okay? They weren't considered authorities in the world, but they were considered moral authorities in the world. That's how we got things like prohibition, right? Shit like that. Those were all, that was a woman's temperance movement.
Yeah.
Okay? Because they were looked at as being more moral than men because men were political cogs. Right? And so we were doing things which were based around self-interest and voting blocks and the positioning basically for power, because women didn't have access to social power that way. They had access to power a different way, which was through moralizing, right? And they actually weren't terrible at it. They weren't terrible at it. And one of the things that they did that was really good with moralizing was if women were out giving away the milk for free, they actually knew that that put the condition of most women in a bad spot, right? Because what the older women would say, and if you go back to the 1800s and read their books, it's pretty interesting. Like, look, if you're out there opening your legs, right, that's going to, then men are going to continue to go to you to open your legs, and Stella over there is not going to be able to marry that guy.
Yeah.
That's a big problem and a big no-no, and so we're going to scarlet letter your ass. Okay? We're going to shame you. You're going to have big problems. You don't open your legs for marriage because it breaks the deal for us. We get everything right now, okay? We get everything. Everything we could ever want. Men have to pay the taxes, and we don't, okay? Men, they were obligated to take care of their children, or they went to jail, right? Coverture laws they benefited women in a big way. Women always act like they were oppressed under coverture laws. Yeah, right. No debt, could hold land, could keep land they inherited, and men could. They had everything in the world.
The coverture law, I wrote about this in Religion. Coverture laws were basically when women say, well, women couldn't own land and they couldn't have their own money. I'm like, no, they could.
They could.
Outside of marriage. If they were married, then all of that transfers over to their husband. And why? Because that guy is on the hook legally
for all of it.
Anything that happens to those businesses, to that
land.
She
could go down, your wife could go down to a department store and spin you into bankruptcy, okay? And nothing would ever happen to her. You got spent into bankruptcy.
You're the one who's supposed to be in control of it.
Right? You're the one who's
keep your bitch in pocket.
Who's gonna pay for it?
You know what's ironic? Have you read the book Freakonomics?
Yes.
You read that? Okay.
I've read it too.
Yeah, in Freakonomics, the concept of the cost of prostitution or the earning power of a prostitute going through each decade, and how in the 20s she was making somewhere in excess of $500,000 a year in today's money. But by the time she gets to the 1970s, because there's so much free love, the price of prostitution starts dropping vociferously because of it. And the idea that it was actually those prostitutes were like the bastion upon, because those women existed, then these other women were able to maintain their virtue. But now, because like what you said before, it is women sleeping around, which actually hurts women more, and not grasping the concept and then using it. So Ryan Teraband, he also does a great job of this, of like looking at the economic reality, and Aaron Clary, the economic reality of what free sex was doing to the population. Because the thing about it is that when you have a hedonistic culture, and you have hypergamy, you're always going to have polygyny. at some point. And you've mentioned this before. If you let society go in the realm that it's going now, and trust me, I'm someone who knows about this firsthand, you will have several women chasing after these few guys at the top and a large group of men at the bottom, and in certain societies strapping bombs to themselves because they have no upward financial momentum or living a life of sedation with pornography and video games, and you've left these men behind completely because of the polygyny you've created.
Yeah, the idea of a polygynous society is insane. And we can just look at societies where there is polygyny to notate that they're insane societies. Societies in which, from my view, my worldview, right, I consider this part of God's plan. Why? Well, there's a woman born for every man.
Yeah.
Okay? They're almost equal in numbers.
Yes.
Why would that be the case if it was the case that one guy was supposed to have 17 of them or 15 of them or 10 of them? Well, it's not. Right? It's not the case. And that creates a huge amount of genetic diversity, which is excellent as well. People forget about the inbreeding part that polygynous nations have. When you go to Pakistan, for instance, and it's like 70% inbred because of the polygyny issue. But the other thing that it does is it creates this idea of a class system. And if you have an underclass, right, that sees the overclass is not only getting all the money, think about what they do right now when they think that they're getting all the money. Right? They're rebelling in the streets, Occupy Wall Street, hang the rich, destroy them. I don't have enough money for gas, and this guy's flying around in a jet. Man, you throw wives and access to sex in that, they're all dead. They're all dead because men, we have a heavy desire for procreation. I think it's God-given. You may not. You may have the idea that this is evolutionarily based. But we're still saying the same thing.
Yes.
We're still saying the same thing. The drive is there. And men have killed each other throughout history for women.
More so for women than
for
any
women,
other reason.
Women were a prize, right? The way that if you were a nation, you didn't pay soldiers. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Soldiers got plunder. And what did they get to plunder? The women.
Yes.
Yeah. I was looking at this. I was reading this article just recently, and it was talking about the regulated sexual marketplace versus the unregulated sexual marketplace. Now, regulated is kind of like what we had prior to the sexual revolution, prior to hormonal birth control, which is where you would have like a 6 gets with a 6, a 7 gets with a 7, an 8 gets with an 8. It's kind of like assortative mating, which I don't think is necessarily an innate mating strategy. I think it's a socially enforced mating strategy.
Or maybe it's just an economic reality. There's just not enough 10s for all the 6s today.
In an unregulated sexual marketplace, it looks a lot like what we're talking about when it comes to hypergamy, because what we've done is we placed the reproductive process, the control of it anyways, in the hands of one sex. And so what is that? Who's going to benefit from having a 2 get with a 10, a 3 get with a 10, a 4 get with a 10?
And it also creates lopsided power dynamics.
It does, but that we're and then you add to that, we're also living in a globalized sexual marketplace courtesy of the internet and social media right now. So it just exacerbates the unregulated side of it.
I think that's the single biggest thing. It's not just that I can see
hypergamy has been around forever, but we had fail safes against it prior to the sexual revolution.
I want you to consider this. Consider the king of England in the 17th century, or actually, let's go back to the 1650s. Like, let's think about Henry VIII. Henry VIII died of gout, which is something we could easily cure now. So, like, we're wealthier in some ways than he is. But I want you to consider the level of stimulus that he was able to receive being the king of England, and then the level of stimulus that someone who was like a feudal farmer.
Average guy.
Okay, now I want you to consider that Kim Kardashian, Cristiano Ronaldo, The Rock, and me will see the exact same images on our social media. Like, we are subject to the exact same level of stimulus as people fabulously more wealthy or more powerful than we are. And so now what's happens is, whereas Kim Kardashian might actually be able to date, get some guy like that to settle down, and she's probably a bad example, but whoever, Megan Fox, whoever. And now we are seeing the average woman still. Now, it's not just the images. Now I can communicate with him, and now he communicates back, and he'll definitely sleep with her, but he won't commit to her, and now it screws her up for life because it's this constant monkey branching of one high-status male after another that you're trying to get to, and next thing you know, you're 30, and then you're like, you know what? I don't know why I did all this. I'm not going to take accountability for it. Let me get right with God, and then we'll have this whole thing work out. But I think social media is Richard Reeves thinks it's education. I don't agree. I think education is 15% of it because women are getting useless degrees. And so many men are becoming wealthy without college degrees. I don't think it's education. I think the majority of the culprit is social media, like what he said before, average women now feeling that they can compete for the top tier guys, which is causing them to take terrific men and not give them a chance.
Well, I would say that I think that you're right, but that the core problem's reverse. So I agree. If you have access and you're in rural Texas in a town of 400 and you're the pretty girl in the town, you can now pursue men who are far and away outside of your league, and they're going to fuck you. And once they do, you're going to think that other men will definitely end up marrying you, and that's really a bad a bad plan.
The reason I was bringing up the regulated marketplace versus the unregulated is because one of those fail safes, of course, is the church. And it's not just the church, but like it's
not just
mainly,
the church.
It's like the social.
I think
stigma
the grounding foundation is sexual ethics. And let me make my case. If we had access to all of this tech right now, all the social media, all the everything, but there was no abortion, no hormonal birth control, and no condoms, it wouldn't even be a problem.
Because eventually you'd have women making different choices.
They would have to.
Because
they would have
the risk is always there.
So the idea is sexual ethics, I think, is the major failure. So people always ask, will be like, Andrew, why do you harp on sexual ethics so much? It's not even a big deal. All you care about is making fun of and gays. And it's like, no, look. Well, you guys, you came into something which was key, right? Which is, what is the cause of intersexual dynamics and the huge problems that's going on with polygyny and the most important thing, the fail-safes? Rollo says, well, the church is a fail-safe. I agree. Small fail-safe, right? It's done fairly well at sexual ethics, but it had something else to reinforce it, which was much more important. There was no hormonal birth control. So it was a really easy message to be like, don't be a because you're going to get pregnant with somebody's kid and you're done, right? You're done. So that was an easier message to swallow. Well, and right now, people can have affairs illicitly on their wives, girlfriends, whatever, right? And they can cover it up basically forever, right? Women can use abortion as birth control. They have access to hormonal birth control. Men have access to condoms. Men have access to vasectomies. And if that's the case, I mean, if that's the case, then sexual ethics, what you're seeing is now you can be tempted with no consequence. And before, when you were tempted, you still had the idea of a consequence, right? If I get her pregnant, my wife's going to leave me and this is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But now, well, you can just have all the sex you want and maybe even keep it under wraps, right? And there's no consequence. So I think sexual ethics is actually the root, and that social media, if it existed right now without those things, right? Yeah. That sexual ethics being kind of enforced and socially enforced, we would still have that fail-safe and we would still be fine. But we don't. The technology shut down the major fail-safe.
Yeah.